I want to ask you something. How much is too much to pay for a MacBook? Because back in March, I paid £1,500 for this M5 MacBook Air. And today, just 3 months later, the exact same model costs £1,999 here in the UK. And you know what? I'm not even feeling that smug about it. Actually, I'm kind of smug about it. But here's the thing, I didn't buy this to save money. I bought it because I don't trust myself. Stay with me on this one. Now, when I decided to get the M5 MacBook Air 15-inch, it wasn't because I needed more power. I already have an M4 Pro MacBook Pro with a ridiculous amount of RAM, and that thing will take pretty much anything I throw at it without even flinching. The problem wasn't the machine, the problem was me. My work life and my personal life were bleeding into each other all the time, and the tool that was meant to help me focus was actually making it harder to switch off. When I was working, I'd drift into personal stuff. When I was meant to be relaxing, I'd end up back in work emails, editing, planning. It got to the point where I realized I needed a very clear line between work tech and personal tech, the same way I've done with my iPhones. That's where this MacBook Air really comes in. It's my way of drawing that line in a way that feels practical day to day and also a bit of fun at the same time. I did look at creating a second user profile on my MacBook Pro, but when I thought it through, it wasn't going to work for me. I do a lot of video editing for the channel and I prefer to work with files stored locally. I don't want everything living in the cloud because editing and creative work feels much smoother when you've got your assets right there on the machine. With the projects I do and the way I like to work, having two separate environments on one SSD would have been too cramped. On top of that, my wife's also trying to separate work and life, but she's much more sensible than me when it comes to spending money on tech. So we agreed that this computer would double up as our shared personal and private machine. We already have a joint iCloud account for family calendars, email, and all that stuff. So it made sense for this to be something we could both pick up and use when we're not working. When I went to look at the MacBook Air in store, I already knew I didn't want the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I've always been a 13 or 14-inch laptop person because I like portability. The 16-inch Pro has always felt a bit too big and heavy for my taste. The 15-inch Air was different. On paper, it is a larger machine, but in the hand, it doesn't feel that way. It's thin, it's light, and it's got that cool aluminium feel that all modern MacBooks have. I still get a buzz every time I pick up a MacBook and feel that cool metal. The Air is no different. There's no drama in the box. You get the laptop and a USB-C to MagSafe cable. That's it. And that's fine by me. The first thing that really hit me was the screen. The moment you open the lid and see all that extra space, you realize how much you've been squeezing onto a small display over the years. As I said, I've always gone 13 or 14 inches for portability, but because this MacBook Air is mostly going to live at home, I don't care about shaving off those last few centimeters. For video editing, more screen space makes such a big difference. Timelines, media browser, preview window, all of it just breathes more. For watching content, it feels more cinematic, even if you're just catching up on shows in bed. It even made me wonder for a moment if I should consider a 16-inch MacBook Pro when I eventually replace my current one, although with the power these machines have now, I probably don't need to think about that for a good few years. Ports always come up in reviews, so let's talk about that. The 15-inch M5 MacBook Air gives you two USB-C ports, which are Thunderbolt on the side, plus a headphone jack and MagSafe for charging, and that's your lot. I noticed the reduced number of ports straight away because my MacBook Pro has a lot more. Reviewers always complain about it, but the thing is, when I stopped and thought about how I actually use my MacBook Pro, I realised I very rarely use the HDMI port. I almost never use the SD card slot, although I have just ordered a new compact digital camera, so that is probably going to change. But at most I use 2 USB-C ports at a time, and I've never once used all 3 together. So for my real everyday use, 2 ports on the Air's perfect. And so far in the last 3 months, I haven't felt limited even once. Over the last 3 months, the pattern of what I use the Air for has settled in quite nicely. Emails, web browsing, messaging, and family admin. When I want to do research, I'll have a few tabs open, some AI tools running, and maybe a notes app or a writing app up at the same time. The MacBook Air doesn't blink at that. Creatively, I've used it for blog writing, scripting, videos, working with images, and editing 4K video for this channel. I've taken it traveling more than once now. Our Madrid trip a couple months back was the first real test. Using it on the plane to create content and edit a full video, and it didn't feel bulky or awkward at all. Caveat that I was sitting in business class. Since then, it's become my default machine for trips, and the extra screen space keeps paying off. It really feels like having a little mobile studio with me. Performance-wise, I feel like I've got loads of headroom. Apple's M5 chip is rated up to a 10-core CPU and 10-core GPU with all the usual Apple efficiency built in, but I've never once sat here thinking about cores and memory bandwidth. I just open what I need and get on with it. Working with 4K footage is often where laptops start to struggle, especially when you stack effects and transitions. But the Air has taken all of that into its stride. I went for the configuration with 24 gigabytes of unified memory and a 1 terabyte SSD. And 3 months in, I'm still glad that I did. It's given me the freedom to not worry about storage. At the same time, I think plenty of people could go with a lower spec and be absolutely fine. I've never been someone who obsesses over battery percentages, but the battery life on this MacBook Air is one of those things you only really notice when you step back and think about how little you've actually charged it. Apple says up to around 18 hours depending on workload, and that totally lines up with my real world experience. The Madrid trip was, as I said, the first big test. Flight there with video editing, movies and shows every evening, blog posts, AI research, more audio and video work, and I only charged it once in 6 days. Since I've been back in normal home use, I'm still only plugging it in every few days. These modern MacBooks are so efficient now that battery life becomes something you just stop thinking about. The display's been great for both watching 4K content and for video editing. It's a 15.3-inch liquid retina with wide color and true tone, sharp and rich without being over the top. I've had no issues with color accuracy, and I haven't missed the XDR panel on my MacBook Pro that much at all. The one area where I have noticed a difference is anti-reflection. My MacBook Pro uses a nano texture display, and that makes things much easier in bright light. The MacBook Air's got the standard glossy finish, so in direct sunlight you see more reflections. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's something to be aware of. For the 60Hz refresh rate debate, unless you're gaming, you're genuinely not going to care. I've got a PlayStation 5 for gaming, so that's not my world on a MacBook of any type. Audio on the 15-inch Air has been really a pleasant surprise. The speakers are punchy for such a thin body, and this model supports spatial audio and Dolby Atmos on the built-in speakers, which gives it an edge over the smaller 13-inch version. Watching TV shows with my wife in a hotel room was a great test. Dialogue was clear, the soundstage felt really wide, and we didn't reach for an external speaker once. Thermals and noise still haven't been something I've had to think about across 3 months. It's fanless, and in all the work I've done, that has not been a problem. The heaviest thing I've thrown at it has been 4K editing and rendering, and in those moments it's felt like a hot knife through butter. My M4 MacBook Pro has fans, but I barely ever hear those either. So maybe I just don't push my machines to screaming territory. Now, the really interesting bit is price. And this has become a much bigger conversation than it was when I first got this machine. When I bought it at the end of March, I paid £1,554 for this exact spec from John Lewis. I think it was $15.99 or $16.99, and Amazon had it at 10% off, and John Lewis price matched it with a 2-year warranty. So the timing worked out perfectly. At that point, nobody was talking about big price rises at Apple, but since then, Apple's hiked prices across MacBooks and iPads, citing rising memory and storage chip costs driven by global AI infrastructure demand. Today, the same spec Air is sitting at around $19.99, and the 14-inch M5 MacBook Pro with the same RAM and same SSD is now around $21.99. That pushes the Air right up into MacBook Pro territory, and it completely changes the conversation. There are two things I keep coming back to on this. First, I'm really glad I did this when I did. There was no hint of these rises coming in the first quarter of 2026. By sheer coincidence, I saved a ton of money. If I'd waited till now, I wouldn't have done it. No way. That extra £400 or so on top is a very different decision to make, and I think these price rises will lock a lot of people out, or at the very least make them stop and really think hard about what they actually need. The Air used to sit in a very comfortable spot as the default, just get this and you'll be fine MacBook. With current pricing, it's still a great machine, but the value story is not as clear as it once was. Second, those same price rises have made me feel a lot less tempted to upgrade other devices this coming autumn. Normally when new iPhones, iPads and everything else drop in September, there's always that little vanity voice that goes, come on, your chip's 2 generations old now, poor you. I've got an M4 iPad Pro, which is still plenty for everything I do, and I don't push it hard at all. But I might have been tempted to do the vanity upgrade to an M6 just for the shiny new thing. Now, when you look at something like a 13-inch iPad Pro with nano texture glass and 1TB storage coming in at around $22.99, and that's before you've added an Apple Pencil Pro and the very expensive Magic Keyboard, that's way more expensive than this MacBook Air. Yes, the nano texture glass is something I consider essential on an iPad and even a MacBook Pro now, but that price makes you stop and think very hard. That's a breathtaking chunk of change to part with for a tablet, even a very powerful one. And I do wonder how this is going to affect what people do come September. Whether we'll see more people hanging on to devices for longer, skipping generations, or moving to refurbished and previous gen models instead of following the release cycle. For me, 3 months in, I'm still very happy with this MacBook Air. It's given me the separation I wanted from my work machine. It's powerful enough for everything I do in my own time. It travels really well, and it hasn't annoyed me once. If you're on the fence wondering if it will do what you need, I'd still say it's an absolutely brilliant machine. I'd just add one thing now. Look at the current prices carefully alongside the MacBook Pro, because the gap between them is not as wide as it used to be. So here's the big question I want to ask you. With Apple's prices now at these levels, would you still buy a MacBook Air? Or would the price make you stretch to a Pro, wait it out, or look at something else entirely? And on the iPad side, if the 13-inch M6 iPad Pro with nano texture comes in at $22.99 or more this autumn, is that a machine you'd still consider? I'd genuinely love to know where you land on this. Let me know in the comments below. And if you're listening on the podcast, drop us an email at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you've watched this far and found it useful, please do hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help this little channel keep growing, and it means the world to us. That's it from me. I'll see you on the next one.